Welcome to the longest term board gaming podcast. This is episode 18, House Rules. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
In this episode, we're going to have a short discussion about something that is near and dear to Kevin's heart. House rules. We're going to talk about our first experiences with some house rules, when house rules are okay, when they're not okay.
We're just going to talk about everything house rules. Right?
Right. We're gonna do it. We're just gonna do it.
We're going to jump right in.
Hop shida, let's do it. I'll just throw this question out there. What are your first memories of house rules?
I have none.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, I have no memories of house rules, right?
Well, maybe that. Well, okay.
They were never part of my early gaming experiences. I don't remember anything about it. It's not like.
Did you play games as a kid?
I did, right? I played games as a kid. I remember I played Rummy with my parents a lot. We played Mexican Train. I played a lot of chess. It's not like I was going to play chess, right? And say, hey, let's make the movement for the queen different, right? It's like it just never came up for me growing up that we were going to change the rules to a game.
No,
right? So there was no house rules.
I'm right there with you, Kevin, because that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is like,
are you anti-house rules too?
Well,
we'll get into.
Hey, we haven't talked about for or against house rules.
Right, yeah.
Spoiler alert: I'm against house rules, but we haven't talked about that yet.
But no, like I just didn't have a whole lot of house rules. Like we played games, and the closest I could think of house rules is just playing rules wrong. Like we just didn't know how to play games, and so we made up rules. And this is the closest to house rules we could be, because we're like, oh, I think this is how you move this figure in Stratego.
I don't want to look at the rules to really find out.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay. Well, I guess I wrote down a number of house rules that I played as a child.
I do have more content that I have for that.
I mean, honestly, we played what we called Idaho rules for Uno. I don't even know the real rules and what the limitations are with Uno, because we played so many different variants and house rules or Idaho rules that I have no idea what the actual rules on Uno are.
And I don't.
And it's not a game that I seek out to play anymore, but I honestly don't know what some of the rules are.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tyson. I don't think I've ever played Uno the right way ever, because we played it.
So you did play house rules.
Well, no,
house rules is not the same as playing a game wrong.
We played the game. We played the game wrong, and I think we played Uno. I played it last year. For some reason, my daughter looked. I have Uno tucked away in a shelf somewhere, and she was corner. Yeah, she found the dark corner of Uno, and she pulled it out and said, "I want to play this game." I'm like, "Oh, I'll play any game," And this is fun to play with my daughter, and we read through the rules, and I'm like, "Huh? This is how you're supposed to play?" Yeah, and I don't remember what the rule was, but I'm like, I have literally been playing this game wrong my entire life.
Had the exact
and I don't
experience.
consider that a house rule. That's just a massive failure on my part to read the rules of a game, right?
I did the exact same thing with the exact same game.
It was probably an Idaho rule. Yeah.
It was.
I don't even know what that is, but
Uno. And I played it, and I played this a couple of months ago, actually, because I played it at one of my work trips. Because somebody had gone and bought a deck of Uno, and I was like, "Oh, great, we're gonna play Uno." And they were like, "Hey, does anybody know how to play?" And nobody knew. And I was like, "Hand me the rules. I'll read the rules."
Nobody knew how to play Uno.
Nobody knew how to play Uno. So, and then as I read it, I was like, "Well, this is not how I remember playing Uno." And
there's 3.5 rules to that game. Okay, a little aside. Sorry, on Uno. Have you guys ever played Big Uno?
No.
With the cards that are 3x5 or 4x6?
They're even bigger 4x6. They're even massive, and it's the only way to play Uno.
Okay,
it is hilarious because everybody fans out their cards in front of them, and it's like you can't even see their faces anymore. It's pretty fun.
I mean, if
you're gonna play Uno, it's a good way to play.
If you play a draw two, and then it's Kevin's turn, can he play a draw two and stack? Is that an actual rule, or is that an Idaho rule?
I don't know what.
And I call them Idaho rule. I think that came from one of my sister-in-laws was from Idaho, and I think we inherited some rules there, and I think that's why we called it Idaho rules. I don't know if that's a real thing beyond
they were adopted
the scope of our family, but
I don't know. I as far as the draw two, draw four, I don't
keep
even know.
stacking them. So you get out of the draw
No,
too by
I've
playing
played
the
it
draw
that
two?
way,
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's the real rules.
I don't think it is.
I think that's what we were playing wrong.
Okay.
But that's just a weird how that's a culture.
But that's
thing.
like Monopoly,
Why is everybody
too.
playing that way?
Okay, so the next game I was actually going to bring up was Monopoly. Did you guys play with the jackpot, where you start out the game with $500 in the center? Anytime anybody has to pay a fee or some of the other things that they pay for on cards or whatever, it goes into the center. When somebody lands on free parking, they collect the whole thing in the middle.
I've played
and
like
then
that.
you start it over with another $500. Have you guys ever played that?
That's how I played almost exclusively. And then I learned later on in life, way later,
that's a house rule.
That's not real. But like that is a rule that's been proliferated throughout so many different people's playing it that I feel like.
Is that an official rule? I mean, I don't even know. I don't think I've successfully completed a game of Monopoly, to be honest.
One other one that I've played with Monopoly, we used to play this all the time as kids. Anytime you rolled snake eyes, you collected $100.
I think I've played with that, but I don't know that we always played with that.
So
I don't know. I don't know the real rules. So yeah.
The biggest house ruled game that I have, and I think I mentioned this a long time ago in episode 0, maybe. We had this game called Feudal, and it was chess-like. You're trying to capture the castle or something, but each individual guy that you have on your team, whether it's a squire or a knight or a swordsman or axeman or horseman, they have very specific movements that they can do, like in chess. I enjoy chess. I love chess. My brother and I came up with our own rules for this game. We kept the player movements, but instead of just, hey, if the squire moves here and attacks the king and he kills the king, we had a dice into it. So the squire had a 4-sided dice. The king had a 20-sided dice. The knight had, I think the horseman or the knight had the 12, and axeman had a 10, and archers had the 6. And so we turned it into a dice checker game. And I'm sure the base game is good, but we had so much fun adding in our own house rules on this game and coming up with really a new variant of the game. And to this day, my brother still has the copy of that game, and I would love to play it with him again. And I would play it the same way that we played it as kids, because it was a blast. So that from when I was thinking about like my childhood and from early history of gaming, like that was the one that stood out the most to me. That was the most different from the actual gameplay on purpose.
See, and I cheated with this question a little bit because for me, like Kevin and I were saying, I didn't really have a ton of like early memories where I felt like that, but I have with my own kids implemented some house rules, and their early gaming memories are going to be full of house rule-y types of things. Like for example, with Icecool, we play Icecool. Most of the time we don't play with the cards just because really what they want to be doing is flicking the penguin and tagging. So we take turns being the chaser or whatever that role is called, and we'll flip it around, and everybody gets to go through the doors, grab the fish. If somebody collects all 3 of their fish first, then the round ends. If the tagger gets both people or however many people are playing out first, then the tagger, chaser, whatever they are, catcher, that's right. They catch everybody and the round ends. So like we do little things like that. Fireball Island, we make a little bit of house rules of, all right, we're not going to necessarily care about the landscapes and taking the pictures and things like that. If it happens, I'll give them to them. Or they don't necessarily know how the card play works super well. They'll play it, and then we'll all kind of choose the card together for them. So we'll do little house rules for my kids because it allows them to get the gaming experience and ease into it. And as they get better at that, then I will progressively add the real rules on top of it so they get more and more experiences.
So we're jumping into the when should house rules be allowed part of the discussion, right? And I had that noted as well. If you want to make a game more accessible to your kids, that I absolutely think that is an acceptable place to put house rules. I think that's probably the only place.
I didn't know you
in
had
my mind.
exceptions to your principles.
No, but if there's a game, if there's a game that I can play with my kids and I need to tweak it a little bit, like I have a 4-year-old, she's not into heavy strategy games or any strategy games, or she doesn't even know what strategy is, right? If I play a game that's maybe for a 7-8-year-old, and if I can tailor it to her and make it so that she can play and have a good time, I think that is an acceptable reason for having a house rule. I think that's completely reasonable there, right?
Now I have a follow-up question to that for you, Kevin, because I know what my answer would be to this, but I'm curious what yours is. So if you're tailoring to your kids a little bit, and Tyler, you can answer this too for your kids. I'm sure that you've probably had similar experiences. But if you're tailoring these rules to your kids, does that fall into the territory of quote unquote letting them win? Right?
I don't.
No, because
I don't think so. I think you're just letting them participate.
Yeah,
you're making it easier for
More
them
accessible.
Right. You're making it easier for them to play. And that doesn't inherently mean that you're letting them win, right?
Because the rules that you're adjusting or house ruling is across the board for everybody, right?
They're still the rules.
Yeah,
right.
It's not like you're letting them win. Yeah, it's for
and that's
everybody.
a whole other discussion.
Right.
Right. Do you let your kids win? Do you give them a participation trophy for showing up?
I think that flows into the when do house rules, when should they be allowed? Because I don't think they should ever be allowed to like adjust for like somebody's ability to win a game, right? Like,
yeah, no,
it's not going to be specific to one person.
Right.
It's like, you don't have to follow this rule, but everybody else does.
Right.
No, it's not like that.
Let's find a different game if you're going to do something like that. I
completely agree.
I think that like handicapping, like I think of like video games like Super Smash Brothers or whatever, right? Where you can add like difficulty or handicapping to a player so that they have an advantage. I don't like that type of house ruling at all. I don't think that.
There are some games that build that into the normal rules though, right?
They do. But I don't love, like, if somebody's teaching me a game and they're like, oh, there's the handicap. This is your first time play.
You're kind of dumb. You're not going to be able to grasp the full game. So I'm gonna make it easier for you.
I'm happy to lose miserably. Like, let me lose by a ton of points. I'd rather play the actual experience than given something that.
Are we talking specifically about our Imperial Steam play or?
No, I did lose miserably. The's no doubt about that.
I lost. You lost even more miserably than
I did.
And I lost miserably.
You lost miserably.
So we're talking about when house rules are okay, right? And
Yeah.
we can all agree that if it makes it more accessible for our kids or younger gamers to be able to play a game, then that's okay. What else? When else is it okay?
So there are times, and we've talked about this already, that I have played a game wrong for a long period of time, right?
I know which one comes to my mind.
Clans of Caledonia.
Yep.
There's no high-speed trading.
There should be.
Which I don't.
After how many
no,
plays
I don't
of doing
think.
it.
I do not think there should be. So I think back on that game, and did my enjoyment of that game, was it lessened at all because I was playing that rule wrong? And no, it was not. But now that I know that the rule is wrong, there is no way I'm going to go back and play
Oh my gosh.
that I can buy and sell because I know that it is in there. So, I mean, the only way that it would be, I guess, okay to have a house rule like that is if everybody was on board that, this rule, we can play it this way. If there's anybody at the table that doesn't want to do it, then you're not going to do it. But
That's
essentially, I've been playing house ruled games when I get the rules wrong, and it hasn't diminished my enjoyment of the game, I guess.
So that was the one caveat that I really think makes it okay for house rules is if everybody at the table agrees that yes, to play a rule that is
Wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Right.
okay. So like I talked about Killer Bunnies last episode, right? That game can get frustrating if you keep drawing cards and you don't draw a bunny. One of a house rule that people do play, or I've never played it, but people do play where if you draw 3 rounds in a row to start the game and you don't draw a bunny, then you get to pull one from the deck.
Well, then that's just a poorly designed game.
Well, it's okay, but not every game out there is a 10. And I think that anytime you can improve upon a gameplay experience for a game that's not a 10, then if everybody at the table agrees to it, then why not?
So this is an interesting topic because like I was just thinking about this whole exact thing is, does it increase the fun? Like, and that's ultimately why you're playing a game, right? Is to have fun with it. And is it increasing everybody's fun around the table? Then maybe it should be considered. But for me, I'm apprehensive. No, not even.
I am.
Like, I am very much apprehensive to do that because I have been on the side of developing and playtesting games a lot. And I very much am aware of a lot of edge cases that rules have been designed for specific reasons. Now, that's not the case.
Ding, 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 ding.
That's not the case all around because sometimes people just don't design well or they don't consider every variable. And like there is some truth to that it may not be there. So one example for me of a game where I would consider a house rule, and I think we've mentioned this before, is in Ankh.
Yep.
Right? So we've Ankh and
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, let's talk about
there is because in Ankh, so specifically what I'm talking about is that you have the Guardians, right? And in the game, the Guardians are put, you get 3 different Guardians per every game.
3 types. And
3 types,
multiple of some.
And you could have 2 or 3, 1, 2, or 3, depending on which Guardian is selected for that game. So when Tyler and I played, I think this was the last time we played, we did the variant that included the Guardian auction, right? Which
it's the scenario.
Right.
It's not an optional variant. It's a scenario.
It's a specific scenario. Yep. An official scenario.
But what it did for us in that experience was it created a lot more interesting decisions. Not to say that the decisions weren't already interesting, because we obviously love that game.
To the next level.
But it did. It felt like it fixed issues that we had complained about before. And I feel like we've played a fair amount of Ankh that we felt like, okay, for us, this is really good. And I could see this. I would like to try that in part of that scenario, and bring that into other scenarios, because I think that it could also increase that. But again, going back to the development and design standpoint, I don't know why that wasn't included across the board, and that makes me apprehensive.
That's my point, right? So I did not play that scenario. I would love to play that scenario, because that's one of the criticisms I have of the game, is that you can get locked out of those Guardians, right?
Right.
So I want to play that scenario, but I am still hesitant about taking that part of that scenario and putting it out in other scenarios, because for Ankh, that game, there is no doubt in my mind that game was play tested, a ton, right? Yeah. That it was a conscious decision to put that in that scenario and leave it out of other scenarios, right? So is there balancing issues based on how the maps are set up and how the scenario is set up?
I totally agree. You absolutely could be right, but the only counter I have to that, and this is I really don't know, but I know that during the Kickstarter campaign for Ankh, those scenarios were not finalized. And I don't believe that this scenario had been finished. And much of the things that had not been finalized, the scenario base, was not actually designed by Eric Lang. It was a bunch of developers that I think did a fantastic job. But who knows if even that was like a separate thing that was designed after,
I don't know,
or not,
to appease the masses.
So for me, that specific thing, it prevents people from getting locked out of the Guardians. It also adds more Guardians to the game. There's more types that are added when you add in the auction.
And let's be honest, you want that's part of the draw of this game.
And it adds in the auction aspect, the blind auction aspect that makes you consider your followers in many different ways.
More options for those followers.
Right. And is it worth it to bid followers on this Guardian? Is it there are so many interesting decisions that are created there. I'm not saying, I mean, I probably have said that I never want to play Ankh again without this. I can pull back from that a little bit, and I could say I would love to play through every scenario with this. And if it doesn't work, then not play it with that scenario. But for me, the experience just, and I already think Ankh is a 10.
Yeah.
But playing that scenario took it even a little bit higher than that for me. And so I'd be willing to try it at each scenario. And if it didn't feel like it broke the game at all, depending on the situational god powers and everything else.
What's lost by doing it that
Right.
way?
And there's
and
already
reserving the opportunity.
There's already
to
so
retract
much
that.
variability in that game with the god powers and adding in the Pharaoh expansion. As much as they've play tested it, you're still going to have some
Absolutely.
awkward plays in there every once in a while based on which gods and
Just by probability alone.
right, and which gods merge and which Pharaoh cards in play.
There's no way you can play test everything,
right?
I mean, with all the different variations, for sure. I don't know if I would want to go through all the scenarios like that. I mean, I would possibly. Well, I need to play the scenario that it was designed for first.
Yeah. If you played that,
and then I would reevaluate it. Just the way I feel about house rules, I lean towards not wanting to do it, but. I'm not going to rule it out.
If you played it though, and you were like blown away by it, just like we kind of were, would you then? Do you think you'd want to?
It would. Part of my soul would die. I don't know. I'm a rule follower apparently, right? And I don't know why.
In other areas too, or
well, I mean, I'm not going out and breaking the law or anything. But
well, why not?
But I don't know. For something about it just rubs me the wrong way, right? It's just the way it is.
I'm somewhere in the middle, right? Like to me,
I'm not saying that when I sit down and play a game at the table that I'm looking for house rules to introduce,
change up the game,
to introduce.
I want to redesign this game.
I don't. But I also, for
Eric
me,
Lane, you have no idea what you're doing. Tyler,
rookie
here.
Yeah, right. No, but like, not every game's a 10. I feel like I'm pretty intelligent. I feel like we're all pretty intelligent. And if we came up with a rule that made sense and it could make the overall play of a game that was a 7 and turn it into a 9 out of 10. So why not play it?
My thought is, don't play the 7 game. There are thousands of games out there. Go play a 10, right?
Okay, but how many games do we play that aren't 10s?
So
most of the games we play aren't 10s.
Yeah, and I enjoy those games that are 7s for what they are, and I'm not looking to change
make
rules.
them different.
I'm not looking to make them different,
I'm not
right?
looking to change them either, but if something comes to my mind and it would be fun to explore, and I explore it, and then
it enhances
the experience, then yeah, I'm not opposed to introducing that in.
So that brings up a good question. So one of the thoughts I had with this discussion is fan variants. Fan variants in games, right? And what that does. Because specifically, I want to bring up a couple of fan variants that have really influenced games and changed them entirely, because essentially they're house rules. These fan variant games start as house rules, but I'm talking about like Scythe, Rise of Fenris, or Gloomhaven Crimson Scales, which is a fan variant, or like some of these variants that have actually been endorsed by the publisher and the designer, and they've gone out and physically published these different fan variants, and you can actually go and purchase them as a product. Those essentially are house rules, which leads into the discussion. It opens the scale of saying, hey, a game is not perfect in its final design. There is opportunity for room and growth that even designers can recognize when somebody, another one would be My Little Scythe, right? Like
essentially you're designing a new game at that point.
But you're using the same game. Scythe Rise of Fenris is not designing a new game. It's
creating a campaign for Scythe. It's adding modules to it. It's essentially a new game, right?
Okay, but Gloomhaven Crimson Scales
haven't played that one. I don't know what that
is the exact same thing. Essentially, the only difference is you're adding new characters, you're adding new scenarios, and they made a story for it. So
well, another thing is, I play a lot of Memoir 44. There are official maps for Memoir 44 designed by Richard Borg. there are fan-made maps, and that's a huge, huge part of that game is there's fan-made maps, right? That's kind of a similar thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I don't know if there are different rules, but there are different scenarios, right, that people have developed, and that's kind of a similar thing, right? So that is a big part of the industry. There's no denying it.
Another game came to my mind, Dune Imperium, right? One of your original complaints with that, Kevin, was that sometimes the cards that are available to buy become stagnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I want to do this, but my counter to that complaint would be, well, then let's house rule it and you cycle one card per round. And that is a variant that people do a lot. If that makes your enjoyment of that game better, then why not try it?
I understand that argument.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I mean,
I do understand it.
That doesn't, I don't feel like I'm like Paul Denon is not going to lose any sleep over me introducing a variant into the game where we cycle. And I'm not saying I want to do that, but that just came to my mind. Like, cause I know that's one of your complaints with Dune Imperium in a couple of plays that the cards that were available to buy became stagnant. But
no, and I get it. Right. You play games, and you mentioned this, Tyson, you play games to have fun. However that game plays, if you're having fun, that's the important part, right? So if you're changing the rules and you're having a good time changing the rules, great. I just don't like it, right? So it just bugs me if it's not in the rule book. If it's not how the designer intended it,
just
right?
have me teach it to you, and I can pretend like I taught it wrong.
Well, and that's playing a game, playing a rule wrong isn't a house rule, you know. So it's not like I'm going to go. I want to see a movie the way the director intended the movie to be seen, right? I want to play a game the way the designer, their vision of the game and how they wanted it to be played, right? And that's just kind of. In my mind, whether it's right or wrong, that's just how I feel about it, right?
If you want to read Star Wars books, there was, before it was acquired by Disney, right? Like there was this whole set of books that you could read, this expanded universe type of a stuff, and that applied. I have zero desire to read that because it's not quote unquote canon. And it may be really awesome material that's really great and cool and interesting.
It's house ruled Star Wars.
But it's house ruled Star Wars essentially. And I don't want a part of that. And so I connect with you in a lot of ways, Kevin, with what you're saying. And I feel very similar for the most part. But I also, there are a few exceptions. I feel like I've got a little bit of wiggle room here and there. And again, going back to like fan-driven content, like the Wind Gambit in Scythe was also a fan-designed expansion. Now, granted, that may not be the best of the expansions that exist, but it was added to the game independent to quote-unquote improve the experience or add to the experience, which, again, conceptually, I'm okay with. Like, if you want to increase the fun in your game and it does it for you, and you want to add dice or you want to do whatever, and that's fun for you, that's great. For me, most of the time, that's not going to be the case. Occasionally, I will be okay with that. And especially if it's something where if it's a game I'm only going to play once or twice, I will never house rule a game like that. Like if I play it one time and I'm like, I didn't like this aspect of the game, I'm not going to ever house rule that.
I agree.
For the record, I have a hard time thinking of house rules that I actually play, right? Like I'm not going around trying to house rule every game. I'm not opposed to the idea of if I could try to make this mediocre, good game even better, I'm gonna try and do it. Maybe, you know, I don't know. The other night we were playing Moonrakers. We talked about Moonrakers in another episode.
Bring that up.
And I brought up, hey, it'd be kind of fun to see how this game would play if, when you allied on contracts, you played them hidden what you contributed, and just see how that would play out. I don't think that would make the game better necessarily. I just think it would be a fun experience to see what would happen if when you ally with someone, each of you play your contributions to the contract and then reveal and see what happens. And I think there's way more intrigue and backstabbing that could happen in that situation. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting idea.
You know, and you've thought about designing games before. Maybe that's your designer brain kind of coming out, you know. And thinking about games in that way. I have no desire to design games. So, none at all.
So here's another one. Okay. When we play, what is it, Skull? It's Skull, right?
Oh.
When we play Skull, I've joked about playing blindly before, right?
That drives me insane.
But I'm not actually playing blindly. Okay. But I will say,
you have played blindly before.
I have.
That ruins the game.
No, it doesn't. Here's the thing, though. Okay, we played a couple of games with some friends that we had over. After we went out to dinner with them, we played 2 or 3 games of Skull, and it was like, hey, let's just see what happens if we all play blindly. And it was hilarious, and it was fun, and I don't want to play that way every time, but it was fun to try. And we had a fun experience and we all laughed about it. And it created some interesting things that, I don't know, I enjoyed it. And I would do that again. I would play it a couple times and then, hey, let's all play blind and see what happens. One thing I like about the mind, and it's not a house rule because it's written in the rules, but it says,
I would totally play it then.
When you've beat the game, and in the mind, you're playing cards face up, trying to get them in order without communicating. You're playing cards from your own hand. And once you beat the game, it tells you, okay, now try playing it by playing the cards face down. And then after everybody's played all their cards, flip them over and see how well you did. And that was a blast. And, you know, it's in the rules, but is it really a rule? I mean,
it is because it's in the rule book.
But
it's funny. It's funny. As I was thinking about this episode, it even kind of bugs me a little bit when you're playing a game and there's a situation that comes up that you don't quite know what the answer is. And then collectively, everybody says, hey, I think we should do this just to move the game forward. I would almost rather take 5 to 10 minutes and open the rule book and look through it to see like if what the real answer is, because that decision could affect other things that, you know, in the rest of the game. That one for me is
situational, but go ahead.
That one happened in Moonrakers.
Yeah.
Our last play, we're like, okay, let's just do this. Does everybody agree? Okay, everybody agrees. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I agree. But, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm like, that still kind of bugs me a little bit. You know, I don't know why, but it kind of does.
For me, that decision is a little situational. I'm glad you brought that up, but like, if it feels really right and the consensus is agreed, I'm okay going forward that way. And then finding out after the play, hey, did we really play this right or not?
It's not really a house rule. It's more ignorance.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But it kind of falls in that realm a little bit.
I think going back to what you were saying a little bit, Tyler, and the discussion you were just bringing up, by talking about like Skull or the Mind, right? You were talking about games that have a relatively short playtime, right? They're smaller games. I'm usually more amenable to being like, hey, let's try something different if my investment of time is not huge.
That's a good point.
If it's if you're talking about, hey, we're going to play Twilight Imperium and house rule Twilight Imperium to do this, and this, I'm like, no. I'm not going to put 8 hours worth of time into this game thinking that maybe this experience, this rule change is going to enhance my experience. I don't want to do that. But if it's a 15-minute game, a 20-minute game, and
so what if there's I have a question. What if there's a game that is really enjoyable and really fun, but it drags on too long, and you could implement a house rule that would shorten the game? For example, and I don't know how you guys feel about this game. I think I know. I love Trivial Pursuit. I love trivia games. Sometimes Trivial Pursuit can drag on and on and on. A simple house rule is, hey, answer any question on any space. It doesn't matter if you're on a pie space or not. You get a pie if you get the answer correct.
Trivial Pursuit is a different animal to me in a little bit. No, but I see what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, except that, like with Trivial Pursuit, absolutely, I'd probably be fine with that. Most of the time with Trivial Pursuit, I don't actually play the game. I just want to do the trivia anyway. But if you're talking about like a game that I feel like is too long and needs to be shortened, oh, let's reduce it a round or two, or whatever it is. Like
That's a fine line with
that
certain types
scares
of
me.
games.
I do not want to do that. And if I feel that way, that it's too long of a game, and I'm just like, I would much rather just find a different game that I enjoy than alter one that could make that game better because it was too long. Because I feel like it loses some of the stuff.
Find a better trivia game, maybe. Yeah. No, but I think, party games are that's a genre of game that I could see house ruling, because it's an activity almost, right?
Usually, yep.
Yeah. So like Wits and Wagers, I've modified that game to, right, where we've come up with our own questions that are based on our family, for example. Like we did one for Christmas Eve one year where we wrote questions
awesome.
based on my parents and their childhood, like how many cars have they owned in their entire life, right? Those types of questions, or how many movies are up in their movie collection right now, that type of thing. And I think party games lend to that. It's like, you're just getting together with a group of people and having a good time. So that's a group of games that I could see I would be okay with house ruling, right? The rules overhead on the party games are usually not that big anyway.
Right.
I just thought of a house rule that would make Monster Crunch more enjoyable for everybody.
Impossible.
No.
The house rule is throwing it in the garbage? Is that
No, it's opening the box up,
Playing a different game.
closing the box, playing a different game, and everybody wins.
Oh, funny guy over here, funny guy. Oh my gosh. Guess which game is never mind.
What?
I disagree with your assessment of Monster Crunch, but we've documented that thoroughly
But you
in
could
previous
take
episodes.
my copy on vacation with you and house rule it and create a ginormous game of Monster Crunch, and it might take it to the next level. It might be an enjoyable game.
Oh my gosh. Ladder games are the best, okay? It's like probably the number one mechanic in a game.
Name a ladder game in the top 500.
Monster Crunch.
Scout.
Good call. It's got to be in the top 500 at this point.
1021.
Well, that's Scout then.
That's probably pretty accurate too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, but it's funny. We talk about house rules. My brother-in-law, Matt, he's always thinking about the most extreme way to play a game. And he's always trying to come up with like, hey, we could combine this and we can combine this.
That's kind of awesome.
We could do all of this. And I probably.
Do you ever indulge him?
Well, I would not too often.
He cringes every time.
I do. Like I said, I don't know. It's probably a character flaw or something. I have no idea. It's just in my brain. It just doesn't compute that we should modify a game that I bought to be played as according to the rules. That's just something. Something just doesn't.
See,
it doesn't mesh in my brain.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like I said, I don't go around looking for games to modify. At the same time, it's my game now. I don't care who designed it or how much work they put into it. If I can change something that I'll enjoy it more, then I paid money for it. It's my game to do what the heck I want to do.
Yeah, and I totally get that. And like we mentioned before, games are meant to be played and have fun. And however you have fun with the game it's money well spent. But yeah.
I think we've talked a lot about situations where house rules can be good, and I think Kevin's even mentioned a couple of those that he'd be okay with.
He's even admitted some party games and letting kids play.
I know. Like, well, what is happening here?
But are there any situations where we can all agree on that, like, you should never house rule, like, for this or whatever?
For me, if it's not a consensus at the table, then you should not house rule something.
Absolutely.
If it's a terrible house rule and it doesn't improve the game, then you'll know that really quick. And I don't know.
Then you've ruined your play.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to start over and hope it's not Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, but I think you're exactly right, Tyler. I think that if you ever have a situation where you bring up an opportunity, hey, I know the rules say the game should be played like this, But I was thinking maybe we should play the game like this, and not everybody at the table is like, yeah, okay. Then you shouldn't implement that. Like, I think that for me, I'd rather everybody be on the same page, and you can play that game. Otherwise, let's pick something else.
I thought of another one, though. Like, have you guys ever played Farkle? It's another push your luck dice rolling game.
It's been a long time.
I may have played it once, but yeah.
So, and I think this is an actual published variant now at this point, but
then it's good to play.
Right, but I'm pretty sure it started out as a house rule or not a legitimate rule, right? When someone decides to stop and they, get their score, they didn't Farkle, they stopped before they did, the next player can decide to roll off of that player's score that they just got, but they have to get the values that player was going for. And if they don't, their turn's over right away, right? They get one roll, but if they get it, then they start building off of, 400 or 500 or however many points the player in the previous turn got. One, it's just another one of those things. I think it's actually a variant now that's been published, but I don't know. I think there are I feel like there are more rules out there if we took the time to think about it that we realize we might have played. I feel like I could find more. But.
Yeah, probably. But I think it goes back to what Tyson said before. A lot of these house rules are for very simple games.
That's true.
Not a lot of, rules in general on these, and you're just tweaking something small in a very small rule set. Well, in a simple game to learn and play. So it's not a lot of time invested if whatever rule you're tweaking sucks.
And I don't think like Praga Caput Regni, right? That game felt short to me. You get a limited number of actions. I never want to add more rounds to that and extend the game. If it's a complicated Euro game or a well thought out game like that, I don't want to extend or shorten a game that feels too long or too short. Like
Terraforming Mars feels too long to me.
Right. And
but
so
I don't think I want to cut that down when I play it.
Right.
Because that's going to change a lot.
Prelude, right? But how many times they came out with Prelude to make it go faster? So what led up to Prelude? I don't know. Was that house ruling? I don't know. Yeah, but when I was saying shortening a game that's enjoyable but drags on too long, I specifically had in mind games like Trivial Pursuit, where it's hey, we could still have a lot of fun, but shorten the gameplay of this, right? I mean, Monopoly is a terrible game. Yep. You could shorten it in many ways.
And then it's just a shorter, terrible game.
Fair enough.
So I think that there are situations, though, where, say, for example, a lot of people did complain about, Tapestry, right? With the civilization balances and things like that. And that was a bigger game. And there were official rules that came out later to make adjustments to the civilizations.
And they still felt off.
So some people would go back and argue and say, hey, well, let's balance this further for ourselves. But at that, I don't want to do that personally. But I mean, I can understand when there are things that the argument that a game is, when it's published, balanced is not always true, right? True. There are situations where, there has been, I know that Stonemaier is very meticulous about their playtesting and do a ton of it and keep a lot of data on that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some situations in where it may account for everything. And so there are situations in which you may be able to say, hey, well, if I implemented this rule, it actually may be more balanced than what exists. I just personally hesitate to do that because I don't have the degree of familiarity with the game and the design itself to be able to feel like I can implement those changes effectively.
I just don't think there's enough data available in their playtesting to really flesh out all of those different factions.
There are so many factions.
And once they had that data and they saw, okay, the futurists they're overpowered, that we've got to nerf this a little bit.
Well, they've nerfed that one twice. Because on BGA, I was playing the Futurist recently, and I didn't realize that there was another adjustment to it that has now been implemented on BGA. Whereas before, you would go up on all 4 tracks with the Futurists, and then you would be penalized by not having as much resources, right?
Yep.
Well, recently, the last game I played the Futurists in, it only allowed me to go up on 2 tracks, but it gave me extra resources.
Yeah, that drives me nuts.
And so I was like, so what is the right way to play with the Futurists?
You definitely need to house rule that. Yeah, absolutely. Let's figure out something else that's more balanced.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
But again, Tapestry is another one of those games where a variant was published as an expansion, arts and architecture. Someone who
Stonemaier
loved playing
is
Tapestry.
exceedingly good at listening to the community and listening to good potential ideas and implementing those. And I really respect that about Stonemaier games. And I think that that's a great way to approach it and say, hey, if it goes back to that fun factor, does this increase the fun? Yeah. Okay. Let's make it official then.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a little bit different than tweaking a small rule and developing an entire expansion. That's not quite a house rule. That's a complete new board. And that's a little
every
bit different.
expansion with Tapestry has had tweaks for the civilization every single time. The plot and planning one.
Scythe is the same way.
Yep.
There's banned combos in there.
Well, I mean, Magic the Gathering is the perfect example of that. Like how many cards and things have changed and said, hey, these are no longer cards that can be used in Magic the Gathering.
Every collectible card game is like that. Because there's so many variations in those. It's like I played a lot of Dice Masters, and Dice Masters had stuff that, they would retire after a while. It just became overpowered. So
to summarize, we all can agree that at some point, some house rules are okay in the right situation, whether that's making a game more accessible for our children, maybe it's a party game. Beyond that, some of us are a little more eager to embrace some well thought out rules that could be implemented, and that's okay. We all have different opinions on it. It's a good discussion.
Ultimately, are you having fun with it, right?
Yeah.
That's like
what
it comes down to.
Everybody at the table needs to agree that it's okay to try or to play. And if it increases the fun of the game, then go for it.
And if you're playing with me, chances are we're not going to play with the house rule. So,
we're going to get that Ankh house rule played at some point.
Hey, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I want to get the official variant played first, but then we'll talk about the other ones.
We've played hundreds of games together, and it's to the point where I try to come up with a house rule every game we're playing.
Just to poke at me?
Just to poke at Kevin, just as a joke. Like, I do this. Some people in our group are a little OCD about how pieces are rotated.
Yeah, because you put them all weird wrong on purpose, and it drives everybody crazy.
That's the game within the game for Tyler.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
He's trying to get in our heads, and it works because I can't stand some of the stuff he does. It's like we're playing a game.
I don't show up to game night with BO and terrible breath, or
there are far worse things you could be doing.
It's like we're playing a game with meeples, right? And everybody lines up their meeples, and Tyler's like, well, he's just going to lay down. I'm like, what are you doing?
Or stand upside down on his head.
In a train game, I'll have the one train card facing the other way.
And then you punch. Yeah, I want to punch him in the face. But,
Yeah, so it's been a good discussion on house rules. It's been fun. And I think, it's been a good episode. So.
Yeah, I think we've covered every aspect of house rules we can cover. So,
and if we haven't, and people have thoughts, please join us on the Discord and talk to us about what house rules you play with, because we'd love to hear them and how it works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear everybody else's opinion. I mean, if anybody feels the same way I do, I'd like to hear about that, because I may be just really weird. I don't know.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our discussion. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more Longest Turn in your life, please check us out on Instagram. Also, be sure to check us out on Board Game Geek, where you can join our guild 3947, and check out our blog, where we post all our show notes and occasionally post more detailed reviews. If that's not enough for you, we have a Discord server. If you want to play a game with us on Board Game Arena, join our Board Game Arena group, The Longest Turn. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Until next time, tot sins.
See you later.
Goodbye.
Yeah. I just thought of a house rule for...
Oh my gosh. Are you okay?
I don't know what happened, but I could feel it coming, and I was like,
Oh, I don't because I have my own. It's near and
Well,
dear.
you could-
near and dear to my
You
heart.
could house rule it
Turn
and
'em
combine
in.
it and make a giant...
House ruled Monster Crunch. What is happening?
Is that the toilet? Toilet flush.
No.
I worked at a golf course in high school, and golf carts have like regulators on them, so you can't get going up too fast. So those are fun to get rid of, so that
house ruling him.
yeah, you modify and
It's a
make
little
it better.
stretch. I thought you were saying, I house rule golf. And I'm like, no, that's just cheating.
But I have played speed golf. So sometimes I'd work in the evening during school, and when the course was kind of like it was getting twilight-ish, I would start on the first hole and I would just run to each shot. I mean, I would be driving a cart, but I would run up to the tee, hit, drive, run to the ball, hit, and just try and play as fast as I could. I played around in 45 minutes before, 9
nice.
holes. It was
How
awesome.
many things
That
got
is awesome.
broken?
What's that?
How many things got broken?
Nothing.
But you're still playing by the rules, right?
Yeah, but I don't know about the unwritten rules of golf. I mean,
The golf etiquette.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's
You're definitely breaking those
yeah,
rules.
it's way too exciting for golf etiquette.
You've got to be spending like at least 2.5 hours for nine holes to play it right.
That's right. Yeah, you got to wait on every hole for 15 minutes.
You got to be backed up on the second tee.
That's the worst.
It really is.